And in our video, we kind of said, I'll take the person with experience all day long over the person with a degree and no experience. Hey everybody, welcome to the ProfitDig live show. We're glad to be here with you tonight. I'm Jeff Givens. I'm here with Christopher Work.
Howdy.
And Jeff Spencer.
Hey guys.
We're so glad you tuned in. We're doing user comment responses tonight.
Right.
And we love these, right?
We do.
Oh, yeah.
They're a lot of fun.
Yeah, I enjoy reading your comments,
Yeah.
even when you're arguing and getting nasty with one another. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's really funny to see people go back and forth in the comments. Yes. Sometimes it gets, it's a popcorn moment, you know. Wonder how this is going to turn out. Yeah.
I'd watch them in real time if I could.
Yeah. So we've got a question here from a legit 123456.
I like that.
That's a pretty interesting username.
Yeah.
What if his name is just like Alex Jit something? That's it. But I say it's a legit.
I say he's too legit to quit.
He's too legit to quit. Right. All right. Well, but he's not talking about quitting. He's talking about getting started here.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
So a legit 123456 is saying, where do these engineers go to get job experience? Where do people with no experience go to get experience? So it's a good question, and I think it was in response to a video we did about comparing someone who has a lot of field experience but no degree versus someone who has a lot of education but doesn't really have any experience in the field. And in our video, we kind of said, I'll take the person with experience all day long over the person with a degree and no experience.
Yep.
And I said, even an engineer, when with no experience.
Yeah, well, and I don't think it's necessarily job specific, right? Like this is just a really broad topic.
Yeah.
What I can say though is for engineers specifically, you're going to school somewhere to get your degree.
Right.
And when you're deciding which school to go to, if engineering is your path, regardless of the type of engineering, but any type of engineering work or maybe maintenance work, look and see at that college or whatever institution, even if it's just for a certification, look and see if their program includes hiring you on board with local companies. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be local companies, but just giving you an opportunity to get experience as you get your degree. And a lot of schools will have this built into their programs. Take advantage of that. Personally, when I was getting my electrical engineering degree, I worked for Bridgestone Firestone as a co-op, which is basically just a paid internship. And what was really beneficial about that role was I was in a factory. You know, we made tires, big tires, and I worked in the printing press section. So they were basically like giant waffle makers, but they made tires instead of waffles, right? But there were several other sections of the facility, but I was specifically assigned to an engineer who ran the curing department, right?
Good.
So during my time there, I started out with some real basic light stuff, and that's the expectation if you don't have any experience. They give you some little jobs to understand kind of how to go about day-to-day business, and for my work, it was controls work, so I was working with PLCs more than anything else. So we were basically in these big printing presses, these curing presses. Anytime there was a process, you know, whether the arms come in, grab the tires, put them in, it opens up, closes. There's all these procedures that have to take place, and it's this orchestra of logic that has to be commanded. They put me on revising some of these processes. So you really dig into the process control of what happens. That was my first few months. And then even just designing like the touchscreen interfaces for each press, right? Making sure that you can run different controls and functions, find different statistics for that press, like how long is it taking to cure stuff, you know, a lot of details. So what was interesting about that was by the time I left, I had gone from basically playing with the engineering I had a $1.2 million project expected to have a return on investment over 2 years.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm in college, scared to death.
Yeah.
But it was also super cool because it gives you an opportunity to take some responsibility, make a decision that the company is going to move forward with, that they expect to have a return on investment. Like, they didn't just hire you and 14, I think I was making $14 an hour, which at the time was like a decent rate.
Yeah.
Well, that was like 35, 40 years ago.
Yeah, it was pretty good for my
They
day.
had invested in you.
They had an investment, and they also probably would have liked me to apply to them after the fact.
yeah.
Now, I decided not to go that type of controls engineering approach with my degree. I went a different route, but having a year of experience there with them continuously giving me more responsibility. Look for something like that when you're trying to figure out these schools to go to. And if your school or if your local area doesn't have that, seek that out and travel, or find work to do yourself. Because not only did I take the co-op job, but when I wasn't working specifically on my co-op in college, I was working locally. I went and applied at different places. Said, hey, I'm an engineering student. And I did some jobs that weren't engineering. Like, I think I worked at Honey Baked Ham for like 6 months, which was really cool. But I also found an engineer in the area who did forensic engineering. And that was super cool. So he hired me making more money than I was making at my co-op.
Yeah.
Right? So I went out and sought those out. So you can do the same, where people are looking for someone to take a light load off of them, some of the menial tasks, whereas they've got years of experience and all the expertise. They're willing to pay someone trying to break into this field significantly less than it costs them to do the same tasks.
Right. And that's kind of what we were alluding to, in the original video was like, or I was anyway, when I made the comment, about having field experience. It's like in the aspect of work I talk about, it's mostly in civil engineering. Mm-hmm. And so when you're designing a project, grade work, utilities, storm drainage, everything goes along with it. If you haven't worked in the field, just because it's on paper, it doesn't always mean it's going to work in the field.
Right.
And, there has to be, and it's really hard if you're dealing with the engineer, and I say this from experience because I've dealt with several of them that didn't grow up in the industry, decided they want an engineering degree, went to school, which I'm all for it. I think it's a great thing. It's a great field to be in. But when they come out in the field, I mean, they, a lot of them are really lost. It's like that they get turned around just because, they look at their paper that they have designed and like, well, this is going to work. But, you look at
the way it is.
You look at the layout and the way it's staked, and you're, encroaching, have encroachment on somebody else's property line. It's like, it's not going to work, And that's just one scenario.
Yeah.
And there's always like conflicts, like in utilities, like where you may have 3 or 4 utilities crossing in one area.
Uh-huh.
And, stuff like that could be avoided, if you just took a little more time, and looked at it. But they've never had experience in excavation. And so, they don't know how dangerous or how, rough this scenario can be by having these utilities stacked on top of each other, especially new utilities going in together.
Oh, wow, yeah.
You got one utility goes in, then you got another utility, and you're working in soil that, hasn't been weathered, long enough. And so it's, it can be dangerous trenches and, that you're dealing with. And not only that, but, it's just a lot of things can happen, that if you had that experience and worked in those fields, you might look at it different when you design it.
Yeah. So, just say, for example, if you're in civil and you're working toward your engineering degree, it would be worth, what's the word? I'm volunteering my time. Why can't I think of this? Intern. Thank you.
Internship, yeah.
For a company, just to get some of that field time experience and seeing this stuff being,
That would be great.
excavation and lines running and everything in real time. So,
Yeah, and I would say like internship, co-op, whatever it may be, if you express interest and we've talked about this on other videos, if you're just straightforward and honest with people, tell them what your goals and ambitions are, if you don't beat around the bush, they're not going to beat around the bush. If they've got a place in their company that they feel like they could use you, they'll let you know.
They're probably extend an offer, yeah.
You know, I have one of my son-in-laws, you know, he's actually graduated a couple of years ago as an engineer and civil engineer. And he's working currently with a construction company. You know, that's another thing, you know, if you become an engineer, it doesn't necessarily mean you got to go to an engineering firm. You know, there's other options out there, you know, like working for actual, you know, construction outfits, you know, grading utilities, you know, whatever it may be. But he worked during the summers and stuff for this company that he works for now. And after school, he worked for a few months before he started college with this same company. So he was out in the field working, you know, getting his hands dirty, you know, starting at the bottom, working his way up. And then even after he went to school, every time he would come home, he worked every weekend for this company. And every time he had a few weeks off, you know, some kind of break, he worked for that company.
Yeah.
And so
He sought it out.
he sought it out.
And they gave him an opportunity.
Yes. And so he had a pretty good understanding of it, you know, in which in conversations I've had with him, you know, in my mind, I think that field experience helped him a lot along the way in his engineering degree.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's one thing,
Sure.
especially in engineering. There's so much math and theory and physics behind what you're doing. It's hard to correlate sometimes that knowledge
Yeah.
that has been built by scientists and researchers over the past hundreds of years or longer.
Right.
That it's hard to translate that sometimes in your mind to what you see in the field. But what's interesting is once you get field experience, you start asking similar questions that your textbooks and your teachers were actually answering that you didn't really understand the impact of, the real world implications of at the time. So highly encourage like a hybrid approach of make sure you get some real experience. Seek it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys, I mean, you're in the field. You're professionals here. I am not in this field. So anything else you
I thought you were going to say you weren't a professional.
I'm very professional. I'm not in this field.
I'm just messing with you, Chris.
Yeah, no, I've had my own business for 15
Yeah,
years.
I can't say that. I can't say that.
I feel like I got it under control. It's just, you know. Well, hey, we're going to leave it here then, fellas, and I'll take us out. So, hey, hope you enjoyed this video. Listen, like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment, ask some questions, let us know what's on your mind. We love it. We'd love to answer it. And if you're here, I'm assuming you're in the construction industry. So if you're looking for the world's easiest to use bidding and job costing tool, check us out at ProfitDig.com. We'll see you soon.
See you guys.
See y'all.